This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Alrighty, well, welcome to the first episode of Note to Self Season 2. It feels very weird to be doing this by myself. I'm used to doing this with Kat, obviously, and I think moving into like a solo format is so different, and I definitely, if I'm going to be totally honest, have felt very nervous about this. And also, I'm shooting this from my new apartment building. We have this like co-working space that I've been working out of, and I shoot it here, which is good. And I'm going to give it a go, and maybe I'll move back to my actual apartment. So the first episode is from the co-working space, hence my distraction, because just as I got started, people are walking in and out of here, which is great. But yeah, I think I miss Kat, but I'm excited about taking this in a different direction. And there'll still be weekly episodes every Thursday, and we'll be bringing in guests, or I'll be bringing in guests every now and then. And honestly, like if you have ideas of like content you want to see, or topics you want me to dive into, questions you might have, like advice segments, I'm open to anything. I think I just want to have fun with season 2 and really take it in a new direction. And I hope you will stay with me and share with all your friends. But I was reflecting on the nerves around going solo. And I think when you start with someone, which I'm so glad I did, it's almost like you have a blanket in a way and someone there to kind of cushion you in a certain sense. And I think when you go solo, it's just me here. So it feels more real in a way. So bear with me while I get used to a solo format. But let's dive in. I think most episodes, I'll give you some life updates that hopefully you'll find interesting, and usually dive into a specific topic. But again, playing around with the format. But yeah, as you can see, Jeffrey and I finally moved. So we are in our new apartment building. Oh my God, I'm loving it. I can't believe I've been sleeping on they're called like luxury buildings in New York. And I think I was always worried that they'd be a bit cookie cutter and they wouldn't have character. I always loved more of the brownstone vibe. But this one is not too big, which is nice. It's not a high rise. And oh God, it's so nice. Like just the little things. It's my first time ever having laundry in my apartment, which is crazy. But for New Yorkers, they know it's not. So that's been really nice. A dishwasher, just those small things. And even just having this like co-working space that you can pop down to. The gym's right around the corner from my actual apartment. So Jeffrey and I are definitely liking that. We just spent the last few weeks in Florida visiting family. I had my parents over here from Australia, and we were at my dad's brother, my uncle, and my aunt. They have this old tree farm in the Florida Everglades. So we went there for Christmas. And when I was there, I just was reflecting a lot on, I think, how important it is to get out of the city if you live in cities and be in these natural environments. I think a part of me really comes alive when I'm in the city, but then when I get away and get out, I was thinking like, what part of me comes alive when I leave? And I honestly think it's more that I'm able to reset and kind of feel more grounded to the earth. I'm going to get really woo-woo because New York has this very masculine energy. You're surrounded by all these buildings. It's lots of concrete. You are constantly blocked from connecting to the earth in a way, and everything you walk on is man-made. And then on top of that, because the land mass here isn't that big, everything was obviously built on top of each other. I always think of it as like a human antmine, especially when I lived in Manhattan. And I think because of that, you're like, this energy is just stacked and stacked and stacked on top of each other. And it creates this pool that is equally intoxicating as it is exhausting, at least for me. And I think quite a few people I've spoken to. And I also think that's why sometimes people can get a little crazy here. It's just the energy can be really full on. And I think if you can get lost in that at times. But I always find myself wanting to come back, but happy to leave. But I think being out in nature, it's this reset, and you can really connect to the earth and yourself, and there's quiet, and you can hear yourself think in a way. And I just felt very grateful to be able to have a property like my uncle and aunts in this country that I can go to. And I really felt for people that are not taking time to leave the city, even if it's for a day, just to go out and be in a forest or by the water. Just, you have to do it. I think we all need it. And we get all so caught up in this hustle culture of New York. And it really brings you back to the reality of what you're doing here in a way. At least it does for me. And then in the same vein, I come back here and if you can tap into the energy here, why do people say it's, one of the greatest cities in the world? You can do anything here. The Frank Sinatra song, New York, New York. I think they're singing about that feeling because it does have this crazy feeling of anything is possible. And it always hits me when I'm crossing the bridge, usually from Brooklyn into the city, and you're seeing the New York City skyline, whether you're on the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, Williamsburg, you see the skyline and it's this crazy feeling. I've had it ever since I moved here in 2015. And it's that keeps me here because you just truly feel like anything is possible. I've never had that anywhere else. And you're surrounded by people who I think are feeling that too. And I think by tapping into that, you can be propelled in the direction you're trying to get to. So I feel like I crave the chaos of New York. And then when it drains me, I need to step aside or be in quieter places. Hence why I moved to Brooklyn, where it's a little more chill. But yeah, it was an interesting reflection over the last few weeks, especially when you separate yourself and go somewhere that's so drastically different. And just having my feet in the dirt was so lovely. So go and get out of the city if you can. Probably what I need to say to the version of myself that just doesn't slow down is to take a break and I have to remind myself the feeling I get when I'm in those places because it's so easy to get caught up in everything going on here. But I think my most creative ideas come when there's quiet and stillness. And I think you can really reflect on different elements of your life, whether it's a creative project you're working on or a decision you're trying to make in the peace. In the peace comes answers, I think. Anyways, kicking us off very strong, hopefully, but really what we're here for today. I was trying to decide what I wanted to speak about, and I had a few different topics, ruminating. But one thing has really stolen all my mental brain space the last 2 weeks, and that is heated rivalry. I mean, I think it's all over the media, and I was like, do I talk about this because it's being talked about a lot, but I also know quite a lot of my friends have not watched it yet, and I need them to watch it, so I know they listen to the podcast, so maybe this will get them to listen to it, but I really want to dive into this show because I have not been so affected by a show in such a long time, the way that this show has sat with me. And no spoilers, I will not spoil it. I know people are still watching it, but also there's 6 episodes, so please just go watch the goddamn show. But I actually started the first episode over Thanksgiving. I think there had only been a few episodes out, maybe 1 or 2. And my cousin and I, we had been hearing about it on social, and we're like, we should give this show a go. It is a book series, by the way. So we go to turn it on, and my uncle and aunt were also, her parents were around. So they were sitting there while we were watching it, and we knew that it was pretty sexual. So we were a bit maybe they'll just deter and go away. So we watched the first 15 minutes, and it was right before it was I think it was Ilya was about to be giving Hudson a blowjob. I can't even remember the exact details, but that's when we were maybe we'll pause this right here and pivot to something else. And we pivoted to a different show. But the first, 15 minutes of the show, I didn't get it. I was this just seems kind of corny and cheesy, and it was campy in a way that didn't make sense to me. And I just was not about it. So I actually stopped watching it then, and I kept seeing more and more episodes were coming out, and the reviews were getting better. People were saying how great it was. And my cousin continued watching it, and she was deep into it. And she's like, Saskia, it's so good. You have to stick by it. It genuinely is amazing. So over the break, I was like, okay, I need to do this. I want to understand what's going on here. So I started to continue watching it, and God, so glad I did. Will go down in history, I think, as a turning point in pop culture. And I think Where I switched was, at first I thought it was just this like soft porn, romantasy TV show. But having watched the whole thing, I'm realizing the sex is the least interesting part about this show. And it's the kind of like sexiest part, I guess you could say, is really like the first 2 episodes. No, actually, because the sexiest part are definitely the end episodes. It's more like the most erotic parts are the first 2 episodes. And I think what's the most interesting about it is the character development, the emotional world, the storytelling, and like the general filmmaking. So my first impression was, campy, don't know if I love this. Campy in a way that's not good, because campy is usually very good, but it just felt kind of low budget, if that makes sense. And God, was I wrong. And I would say end of episode 2, I had already started to figure that out, because I was really looking at it from a different lens at that point. And it really was like you get more invested in the characters. The show almost changes its tune and the way it's shot as the relationship builds and the intimacy strengthens. So it's worth sticking with. But I think the reason I wanted to bring it up is really what I believe this show is doing on more of like a cultural level. So I read this article that I thought was interesting, because I have multiple different opinions I've read on the show. So this author identifies as a lesbian, and she was saying how she's sitting in this position where she wants to protect the show in a way from straight women fetishizing. Guys, I can't say this word apparently, but you know what I mean. While also celebrating how successful it has been. And that really made me question myself, because I wondered, is that what I'm doing? I identify as, I guess, sexuality is a spectrum. I don't even necessarily, if I like to say I'm straight, but look, we'll go with that. But when you Google the definition of fetishizing, it comes up as to make something the object of a sexual fetish. And the example that they gave is women's bodies are so intensely fetishized. The example is what got me. So out of like everything that you could possibly give as the example in that definition, that was what they chose. And the reality is, so throughout history, women have always and still currently have been fetishized as well as sexualized their bodies. And I think that was something that I actually liked about the show, is it was hypersexual, but in a way that was kind of fun as me, as a woman who constantly has that, to fetishize a male's body. And in the same vein, when I was reading that, I was like, this is something that I guess maybe I am doing. And it's a refreshing feeling to feel like it's not always women in that position. And you could sit there with your girlies and just like both these actors are unbelievably talented and gorgeous, stunning. Like, don't get me wrong, they're so hot. But in the same vein, I also understood what this author was saying. As I've seen in a lot of interviews, especially when they're doing different red carpet interviews, there was one with the actor who plays Ilya, and his name's Connor, and they were interviewing him. I think it was when he was reading out the Golden Globe nominees, and they're so focused on the nudity and the sex. And the other woman who was with him, who's another actress, she kind of jumped in and was like, that's honestly not really what I'm interested in. Like the talent, what these men were able to do in this show, I think is so much more interesting. And like, I think it's the media that's doing that. And sure, maybe some audience members as well. And I think it was an important call out that she made. And it was definitely something that I asked myself is like, am I a problem here, or am I supporting, media that I think needs more of this? And I think the issue definitely is, again, as always, falls into more like the pop culture side of it. And like, why are we focused on that? If there was less sex in this show, would it have been as popular? I hope it would have been, because I think the beauty of this was the slow burn and the acting and that emotional connection that was built throughout it. That was one element that I had read. And then another part of it that I kind of was diving into is both of the lead actors, so Connor Story and Hudson Williams, who play Ilya and Shane respectively, they were kind of commenting in an interview on why they think so many women have been connected to the show, as it's a large, straight, apparently what I've read is a large straight female audience, as well as like LGBTQ communities and support, but that was just something that they've been leaning into. And what they said was super interesting. So there was a few things. There was the prolonged yearning and foreplay and the moments in between where you see desire and this pulls you towards connection. So as someone who's a romantasy fan, which this book falls under that umbrella, it totally makes sense to me. Like, I think the reason I love romantasy is the lead up, the yearning, and it's less about the actual, I guess you could say, climax, but it's more that all that the build up to get to that point. And when you look at this from even, an arousal standpoint, statistically, women take more time to be fully aroused compared to men. And obviously that's not the case for everyone. And I know some data points say that it's not the case. Other ones I've read said it is. My sex therapist, who's also Jeffrey's and my couples therapist, she says that there is a distinction, and she's even seen that in her work. And I feel that myself. Like, I definitely need more of that foreplay and longer time. And I think that that's what this book and this romantasy genre does, is it gives you more of that lead up. So I think that's so interesting that the main audience for this is, straight women, and a big audience for romantasy is straight women as well. The actors also commented on how in straight hetero romance, you usually fall into these tropes where the woman is the communicator and the guy is like closed off. So with two men, it's a little more enticing and more interesting, and it shows like men capable of connecting. And I also thought that was very interesting as well, because so often what we see in media and in television are these straight hetero romances. And even in a lot of the books, the romantasy books at least I've read, that's what you tend to see. And I feel like that kind of makes sense for women, because I feel like women, and another point they kind of brought up was women are getting exhausted by this idea of straight men. And, that's the only kind of version of masculinity. And this showed a different version of masculinity, which is more accessible and interesting, and I think has more nuances. Not all masculinity does, but a lot of what we see, at least in media and the way men are written in scripts, doesn't have that nuance. And I think honestly for me, it was really fucking refreshing to not see a woman being portrayed through a male gaze. Because, think about some of the biggest shows on television. So I read something else. I've read so many commentaries on, Euphoria and Game of Thrones, both written by men, where women are hypersexualized. And it was really nice to watch something where I didn't see myself in it, and we're not being portrayed as an object. And, you could watch these sex scenes, and because you can't see yourself in it, there's an element of safety as well. And I mean, also there was such a focus on consent. They call Ilya the consent king. There was so much questioning of, is this okay? Can I do this? Can I touch you? And I think the writer of the book and whoever, I guess, did the script, having that as part of it is so unbelievably important, because that dialogue needs to be more embedded into everything in our society. And I plan to do a whole episode on consent, because I think it's an unbelievably important topic that we should speak about more. And it was so refreshing to just watch that. And it was so beautifully tied in that it wasn't like it's ruining the vibe. It was just caring and loving, and you could see that love there between them. And I think a lot of that is why I loved this show so much. I loved the yearning. I, loved the build-up. I loved not seeing myself in the relationship. I felt like a voyeur in a way. And it was something I hadn't seen on television before. I think we just need more content like this. It just felt very different to a lot of things I've seen. And I think often I was reflecting on, where I've personally felt shut out by, the relationship dynamics I see on television. And I think it's an interesting question to ask yourself. I think even the way Jeffrey and I approach our relationship is probably different to what I see on television. I feel like we so focus on open communication, and we spend a lot of time working on our relationship. We have gone to couples therapy since we met. And I really think relationships are work, and it's not just a given. And that's something that I often feel is not covered in television. It's these fast, hot, heavy, you're immediately in love. And I mean, this show was I think their relationship spanned over 10 years, something like that is what I read. I can't remember exactly. And it just seems so much more realistic. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other factors at play as to why that was the case, but love does build with time, and it's not meant to be this firework effect. It should be something that grows as you water it and put more into it, because love is an action and it takes time to build that, and it takes a lot of work. And, beyond diving into all of like the cultural nuances of that, I think just the filmmaking was incredible. Like you can't deny it. When I finished the show, everything made sense to me. That first episode that I was like, this is just not good, I totally understood. And I think this is what the director did. This is my personal opinion. And again, it won't give spoilers, but the show changed each episode as the relationship changed. So relationships often start as hot and heavy, and at least in this scenario was hyper-focused on just the sex. And as that dynamic changed, the show also changed. So it went from raw physical connection to a deeper emotional bond. And with that, the tune and the kind of genre of the show almost changed, where the last episode, it almost feels like a play. It was the most beautiful drama and so much nuances to the characters and the way it was shot. The show changing pace was just so smart. I absolutely loved it. I mean, the acting, where to begin? I mean, as someone who used to be an actor, I do understand the kind of work that goes into some of this. And it was so clear to me the actors had dedicated so much of themselves to these roles. And what I found really interesting, my acting coach would call it emotional world building. And there's so many different kind of schools of thought and different methods for acting, but I would say probably more modern approach is not necessarily pulling from your own personal experiences. Of course, those feed into them, but there used to be kind of a school of thought that would get you to pull from trauma, which was really traumatic for actors. So if something had happened to you, they would get you to dive into that, to think about that, to elicit the emotional response that you needed in that scene. And, we figured out that was really not a great way to lead things. And ultimately, we're actors. We should be able to act. I love how I'm using we. I'm not an actor anymore, but it's still in me. But if you do enough work and enough emotional world building, you should almost be in that. You should be in that character that it is real to you, right? And there's actors that will do this method. We all have books like this big, but huge notebooks filled with almost like a diary of the character and historical context of things that had happened with them throughout their lives. What were their parents like growing up? How was their childhood? You look at it almost from like a therapeutic, like a therapy lens. And I always loved that side of acting. When I kind of took this approach, I really resonated with it. And I really think that's what these two actors have done. And you can tell because so much is said in the unsaid. There was so many scenes where there was little dialogue and it was all told through their eyes. And that is so incredibly hard to do if you have not done that work, because this camera, any camera, it picks up when you are not being authentic. It immediately can tell. It is crazy. And I know it seems like, oh, duh, but you can see it when you're in acting classes. And oftentimes I would be doing TV and film classes where you're on camera. So part of that is you watch back your tape that you just did, like your scene. So you can see when someone's not being authentic. And it's wild. This is such an interesting medium because it picks up the tiniest little nuances. So those moments where it's super close, those cuts where it's really close in on their face and all you see is their eyes, but you know exactly what's going on. You know what is going on between these two men. That cannot be done unless they have done all this work. And God, they were really fucking good. Just the way these two actors looked at each other had that yearning, but so much internal monologue and dialogue going on behind their eyes. And it was really beautiful to see. And I love shows that aren't prescriptive. You don't have to say everything. You can let the audience figure it out. And in real life, we're not always saying how we feel. Most of the time, we're not. And it really reflects that, I think. And it wasn't until really the last episode, which you'll see, is it becomes more verbal, but there's still a lot of, nonverbal communication as well. And then on top of that, you have the actor who plays Ilya, Connor Story, who is playing a Russian, and he had to learn Russian in 1 week, and they shot for 2 months. So he learned Russian in 1 week, and then he had a dialect coach for the rest of shooting, but his Russian accent was impeccable. Russian is an incredibly hard language to learn. And he learned it in 1 week and then proceeded to have a coach throughout the 2-month period. It is astonishing how he did that. Most actors would take 6 months, a year to prep for something like that. It's just, I just don't understand how he did that, honestly. And I think if you remember when last season, when I reviewed Kim Kardashian's All's Fair, one of the biggest reasons I was upset by that was the fact that they had cast her. And no shade to Kim Kardashian, but you're not an actor. And verdict was out for me. I was willing to give her a shot. I'll give anyone a shot if you want to be an actor. She didn't deliver, man. She can't move her face. It's really hard to be an actor when you can't move your face. And she wasn't authentic. And you can see that in the camera. And why are we casting people when there's so many incredible actors out there? And I know this from my own experience, being in acting classes in New York and coming across a multitude of incredible actors that are unknown. And these two actors in this show were unknown, and the show gave a chance on them. And I just am so glad they did, because it's proving to Hollywood that you do not need a huge budget. You do not need a well-known actor to anchor the show. And you also don't need to tell a story that's about a straight man and a woman always, which we tend to always lean towards. Other content out there will perform well, and I think the algorithm tells them it doesn't, but look at this, it did. And I really hope those studio execs are seeing this and realizing that invest in storytelling, invest in diverse storytelling, invest in actors who are unknown, and try and find new talent. How exciting is it that these two actors, I think they're at the beginning of their career. The next 10, 15 years are going to be incredible for them, maybe even longer. They will be longer than that, but I'm just saying, I think they'll be very much in our minds. And meanwhile, we're green lighting All's Fair for a second season where it was a terrible show. And imagine how much other content is out there that's really fucking good. And, Heated Rivalry isn't the first show to have had a small budget that got picked up by networks like HBO. Broad City was one that was a YouTube series that got picked up. And I really value HBO for investing in smaller projects. But to be honest, actually, I take that back. This was Crave, which was a Canadian network. They were the ones that invested in the smaller projects, and then HBO bought it from them. So good on Crave. Props. Clap for Crave. Claps for Canada, because Canada's great, and I love that they actually are getting some recognition for their content as well. Let's get some Australian content over here. I think we need to start diversifying what we watch. And it is a responsibility to these fucking networks to show the fuck up and start getting in touch with reality and what people want, and maybe going out into the world and not just staring at a data set to make your decisions on what we should be watching. That's my little speech there. But I think ultimately when it comes down to it, the final piece that beyond everything, this is, I think, the most impactful, is the actors from the show have been receiving letters from actual NHL hockey players who were closeted and saying to them how they felt so seen by the show. And I was interested in this, so I did a little bit of quick Googling to learn how many gay players are currently in the NHL, National Hockey League, NFL, National Football League, and NBA, the National Basketball Association. I don't know. I think it's association. I have a vibe that the listeners are not sports people, so we are getting the definitions here. Anyways, this was wild to me. So I Googled this and it came up as a 0. That's statistically impossible. And that broke my heart, because there must be so many men who are in this position who feel totally alone. They can't speak out, and they don't have anything in pop culture that represents that story. And God, it must feel fucking refreshing to see the world, one, support a show so greatly like this and a story so strong. And now I'm like seeing friends going to hockey games who are like, have never gone before. And it's beautiful to see how it's opened up this new audience as well. But it must make you feel really empowered. And I hope that maybe this could lead to a change in how these men don't feel like they can come out in these types of sports and these types of hyper masculine, industries that they're in. And I would love to see that change, because I'd probably become more of a sports fan if that was the case. But what a beautiful thing for a show like this to do, I think if I was an actor in this show, I would feel like I've really been doing something impactful. And it shows why, again, representation matters, and we need to tell stories that make people feel less alone. We have a loneliness epidemic, and not saying that this is the solver for it, but I'm sure people would feel less lonely if there was more stories out there that people could relate to. And I think that's why everyone should tell stories. That's why I do this, because I really do believe sharing and being vulnerable helps people feel more seen, and I keep saying less alone, but that's what it is. And it's one of the biggest reasons I've wanted to be really vulnerable on this show as I continue to build it. So look, ultimately, go watch the show, support small creators, and hopefully we can continue to encourage these networks to invest in shows like this. And I really hope you enjoyed the first episode. I obviously go watch the show, but also get outside in nature are two things that we discussed today. You can bloody turn off the podcast now. We're done anyways. Go watch Heated Rivalry. I love you. Message me about it. I'm here to chat about it all the time. I will talk to anyone about it. It has changed my life. I will probably go watch the end of episode 4 again, because I'm obsessed with that scene. I have that song forever playing in my head. Those who know. And thanks for listening. See you next week.